And as if by magic, we're back here again, or if you watched the last video, we're still here. If you did watch the last video, you'll know that basically I gave a quick / it's me, so never really that quick, explanation as to why I'm a little bit battered, I'm a little bit burnt out. I kind of went into a little bit of detail on why that's the case, how good and bad stressors both require a bit of downtime and a bit of adaptation, the symptoms that I experienced, and a little bit about what I'm doing now to kind of insulate myself against that and speed up the recovery process. If you have not yet watched that video, please go back and watch that. If you have, wagwan, welcome back, we're here again. And today I'm gonna go into a little bit of detail on the program that the legend, the man, the myth, the hero that is Ben Simons, a couple of things that he's programmed for me to basically keep myself moving during this time, during this little bit of downtime. A couple of different mobility exercises, a little bit of kind of active stretching, but the kind of thing that you can do to not lose your gains if you are having a little bit of time off, if basically you're completely knackered, why you should still do something. We shouldn't be completely stagnant, but we do need to approach things a little bit differently. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on the bike now, which you don't need to see because, you know, you've got shit to do. That would be a terrible way to spend 5 minutes in front of YouTube. But I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on the bike now, just kind of warming my legs up a little bit, and then I'm going to show you some of the little bits and bobs that Ben has me doing to make sure that I stay alive. What is going on, team? Jim Gavin here with the commentary, and getting straight into it. A couple of little mobility exercises to start. Starting with some general spinal stuff. We've got crucifix. We've got some roll back knee hugs. We've got some roll back inverted scissors, which I have no idea what these are. So this is what I kind of assumed they were. So this is what I did. They are all on your back, guys. 10 of each of these. I've then got some cobras and some scorpions lying on my front. And then a little bit of a kneeling thoracic twist and reach. And again, I'm just so flipping lazy. Whenever I have to do mobility stuff, I literally do 5 or 6, and then I want to get straight into the quick stuff. And that has kind of manifested itself in some serious holes in my game, just in terms of general mobility and the way that my body moves, with certain muscle groups being a little bit underactive and certain things really being tight. So 10 of each of these spinal mobility drills in this series, 2 rounds of this, before I then move on to the hip mobility stuff. Some abduction, followed by some adduction, followed by some high hip abduction stuff. Mr. Ben Simons kindly partnered this program with a little bit of a video so I can see how this stuff is done. And my adductor, especially on my left-hand side, it did rupture about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago now. And that was a flipping nightmare. And still now, it's a little bit tight. It doesn't really feel as though it kind of moves in the right way, and it's a little bit clunky, a little bit frictiony when I try to do anything. And I've mentioned in some of my other videos on Instagram recently that it just means that because so much of my stuff is linear, I haven't really done any lateral work, and that really has manifested itself in a proper amount of kind of tightness in my adductor, and it probably hasn't really healed that well. They're all side lying, moving into some seated stuff. Got some windscreen wipers, some L-sit sweeps, which are definitely a new one here. And then some axe kicks and adductor squeezes in the form of a glute bridge position. And this is just to make sure that obviously glute max, they're not going to be under massive amounts of load, but making sure the glute med A can work, but B is also able to kind of be controlled. It's not just about the gross firing of everything, like off or on. You should be able to kind of control the amount these contract to kind of make sure that we're eliciting movement properly, right? Spinal stuff to start, then onto some hip mobility. Overall, bloody happy with how this went, and genuinely felt a difference, which made me realise just on some floor-based exercises, something that my ego probably has been too arrogant to believe would actually do anything. It really did humble me a little bit, because I felt a little bit of a burn on the inside of my leg. So it shows that it's working, and it shows that I need it. What? That is the mobility section done. Literally just mobility. But again, man, when you get a little bit of a burn in certain muscles and certain other ones feel kind of tight or a little bit unused and just a bit shorter than they should do, it's probably a demonstration that I don't do that stuff enough, and I am terrible, man. Like I'm too much of a lazy elastic athlete at the best of times, which basically means I would rather do plyos than stretch. Even though the output is that much higher and obviously it's good, I need to make sure that I do more stuff now to kind of insulate around that to make sure that I'm nice and kind of solid as opposed to getting broken. And that basically does work. I think the hip mobility stuff was really, really good. I do feel strangely limber now, and I make sure a lot of the time when I look at mobility programs, it says 10 reps to do 5 or 6. I'm like, that's enough. And I was like, no, I'm gonna follow this flipping program properly. Did 10 of everything, and I'm like, kind of my hips and my adductors feel a bit looser now. than they normally do, which does suggest flipping heck. It only takes a couple of minutes, man. I'm gonna be a lot stricter moving forward. This is my commitment to you. I'm gonna be a lot stricter moving forward to making sure that I do this stuff properly. And just a quick little juncture before I crack on with like the bodybuilding circuits, which I know, again, I kind of said I'm on a 2-week deload. I'll explain how they're bodybuilding circuits in a minute, but they are extremely light. But basically, a couple of kind of key highlights of this program, and again, the kind of the components that we should look for, the headlines, the objectives of this program that you should look for when you have kind of had, again, flipping years and years and years worth of hard work without ever really having time off. Hormonal health, which I have here, getting a pump, but not very destructive. So it's super, super, super light. It's great for a little bit of kind of growth hormone release, spike in testosterone. It's gonna feel amazing when I'm doing it. I'm gonna get a little bit of a localized pump, but it's not too destructive to my tissues. I'm not doing super flipping heavy sets of between 8 and 12 for kind of like shredding my muscle fibers. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing anything that's too kind of neurally demanding. That's the second thing. So first one is hormonal health. Second one is very, very low central nervous system stimulation. This is the thing, especially when you've got a lot going on generally. This is the last thing you want to do is stimulate your CNS too much. You're supposed to be kind of giving it a little bit of downtime. Number 3, the benefit of this for me is I don't have to worry about programming it. So that overall now, one of the reasons that I'm taking a few things off my plate generally with life, this is kind of a big juncture for me right now. I want to have to make less decisions, fewer decisions, I should say. It's fewer, not less, because decisions are something that can be measured numerically. So therefore, it is the appropriate use of the word fewer, not less. And I remember that because I had a client called Alex Blackmore who used to correct me on that every single flipping time, but I remember now, so thank you, Alex. And that's one of the reasons generally. So when I move forward into my next phase of training, I may look at I may look at Ben or someone else to kind of handle my programming generally, because again, that's something I want a relationship with someone who I can basically trust to just handle that for me, so there's less for me to think about. Fourth thing, yeah, there we go. Number 4 is it leaves me feeling sweaty. It's a little bit aerobic, which it makes me feel as though I'm doing something, right? So the last thing that myself, and I imagine most of you guys, the kind of people that are drawn to me and my channel, you're not gonna wanna just do nothing at all. It allows you to feel as though you've done something. I'm kind of looking forward to that because I don't like to completely rest. The number 5th one is it works in planes of motion, planes of movement that I wouldn't normally work. I could feel it even in the spine and hip mobility stuff that I just did then, and that's good for mobility and joint health. And the 6th and final one is novelty. It's new. Everything I'm doing on this flipping thing is new. I did this once or twice with Ben when me and Ben were in Spain together a few weeks ago. And even then I remember this massive kind of dopamine dump because I'm doing something, I'm both doing something and it's new. So I'm moving, which gives me a sense of dopamine, and purely the novelty in and of itself, and the fact that I don't do this often. It's kind of a few new movements. I'm a novelty seeker anyway in terms of neurotransmitter type. That's basically the way that I'm wired. And the kind of training I enjoy is I'm always looking for something new, and that's what's going to give me a massive dump of endorphins and dopamine. So those are 6 of the 6 kind of benefits and objectives of this program, and Ben is obviously at the fact that him and his kind of programming brand, which is Semtech Systems, absolute pros. So I have done the hip and spine mobility stuff. I'm now going to get onto the bodybuilding stuff. Let's see what Ben has in store for me. So I've just had a look over the program. I'll see if I can show you this now. That Ben has given me, and basically it's on this, it looks a little bit like this. So if you're anything like me, you started training when you were like 16, and any like intro to bodybuilding kind of like textbooks or whatever had these pictures like this of like these like super generic like cartoon looking guys, and I don't know why, it's almost like flipping like PTSD of looking at that kind of graphic, and it just reminds me of like these old school Russian exercises. If I was looking at this exercise chart on my wall when I was like 16 and I was like, oh yeah, do that, and then followed by that, and I just remember everything worked because I was 16 and I looked at a barbell and I got stronger. So basically it just fills me with joy looking at this stuff because that kind of graphic just reminds me of when I was just a wee laddie and I just started. So loads of like empty barbell work, loads of mobility work, loads of hip twists, that kind of thing. I'm gonna do one of these sets downstairs and then see how I get on because I quite like upstairs, so we might go back up there. And then, yeah, I'm kind of excited. Let's get cracking. And I just basically decided that I want to be upstairs. I just prefer the upstairs section. I don't know whether or not there's more natural light. I like the fact it's got turf. There's more kind of room to work. I don't know. But I like it, which is why I just decided to stop being flipping lazy and put the effort in to just take a single barbell upstairs, which is all I needed. And I started off this little kind of general strength section, this little old school Soviet thrower circuit with some Russian twists. So standard kind of back rack position, really screw the feet into the ground and rotate from there, and then make sure that it's not really your shoulders. I'm trying to kind of relax the upper part of my torso. It's not my shoulders that are doing the rotation, that are basically eliciting that twisting movement. It is my core, it is the lower part of my trunk, it is the lower part of my torso that is eliciting that movement. So it's not just a case of kind of, in inverted commas, getting the work done and kind of going from position A to position B. It's a little bit more than that, and it's making sure that it's the right muscles that are making this happen. So 10 of those, moving on to some side bends. So obviously we've done the rotation stuff and the Russian twist, a little bit of lateral flexion now. And again, trying to kind of find the balance between being movement centric, basically taking your body from A to B, but also being a little bit muscle centric and actually feeling the contraction in the specific muscles. And I can feel it kind of in the obliques, squeezing down, taking me over, and then moving to the other side. Back extensors now. This is a really weird one and does look super weird, but it's kind of like a hyper extension. And throwing the dumbbells overhead, just adding a new kind of variable into that with a back arch, where I could kind of catch that position at the top, making sure that my mid back was kind of contracted, so I was getting a minor hyper extension, so more so than it would be kind of a straight stood up posture. Shoulders are kind of contracted and stable at the top in that position, and also I'm on my toes and I'm kind of balanced there. Moving on to some arm abductors, which is what it says, which is basically what most humans outside the Soviet Union would know as lat raises. And it's funny actually how out of breath I am after the rest of the stuff, that this surprisingly was actually a little bit fatiguing. And here we have some scapular flexion. And I'll be honest, this with just a 10 kilo dumbbell in each hand was significantly harder than I thought, actually, kind of bringing this position up. And I felt a little bit of asymmetry. One shoulder's definitely stronger or weaker than the other. And there's a lot of kind of like torso and trunk control with one dumbbell going down and the other dumbbell going up, and trying to kind of swing my body as little as possible but keep my chest up. Definitely more difficult than I thought. And moving on to some scapular extension here. So I'm kind of down into a little bit of a hinge, and I'm effectively pushing the barbell up as high as I can, keeping my shoulder blades down and kind of locked into the girdle. Really weird, and working in an angle, working on a plane that you don't normally hit with this. So this definitely did the job of kind of reminding me that there are certain stabilizers or elements and components of kind of bigger gross muscle groups that just aren't flipping being worked when you only normally execute the same movements in the same way, which I'm 1,000,000% guilty of. So this, again, super lightweight, but really humbling, letting me know that this is something I should probably do more often for overall shoulder health. The shoulder's an amazing three-dimensional joint, and I have to work it as such. Moving into a behind the back upright row, I'm missing a ligament in my left shoulder from an injury in a martial arts competition many years ago. That made this whole thing slightly spicy, but I've done this a couple of times in the last few weeks since doing it with Ben in Spain. And this is starting to get easier, which for me probably tells me that my shoulders are starting to get used to moving in this way, which is definitely a good thing. So there we have it, guys. That is ancillary circuit D, and that is that done. 2 rounds of each, between 10 and 15 reps roughly per exercise. I tried to make it a little bit more aerobic by making sure that I have pretty much no rest between, and I kind of go from one to the other. A little bit difficult at this stage, considering I just keep forgetting what I've got coming up. But that section is now done and in the bag. That was spicier than I thought. 2 rounds, that's pretty much it, and I had a bit of a break to move the camera and cock about between rounds there. But that was it's pretty freaking spicy actually, just purely empty barbell, but it's just moving in planes that you just don't normally move, like behind the neck or behind the back upright row. Some of you kind of rear scap muscles and everything are like, what the hell is going on here? Like, it's just kills you, man. You do get a localized pump. I'm out of breath, I'm starting to sweat, and I don't know, this is great for kind of, again, growth hormone, testosterone, and flipping for mindset. Like, again, the whole purpose of this section is sometimes when life literally throws a million things at you, and I gave you kind of an overview of about 10% of them in the last video, with like work stresses, personal stresses, training stresses, brief overview of all of them. When all of that stuff adds up, you do need to decompress. And with so many inputs in life, sometimes you literally have to force yourself to step away from a program. And it's frustrating, like it is. I'm 34. Part of me, a lot of the time, thinks that I'm kind of a bit against the clock here. I mean, luckily, performance is holding out, body's holding out, energy's there, like I feel great, but it's now and again you've got to force yourself to step away, and that's what I'm doing, but it's super bloody hard. And one of the things that makes it a little bit easier is by doing something that is non-destructive, so it's not making you worse. It's like a little bit of a filler, so you do feel as though you're working. And again, trying to look at this as an opportunity. I get a super mild localized pump, get a bit out of breath. That's what I'm doing with this program, but also I'm working the body in ways that I absolutely wouldn't normally. So that is one of the little bodybuilding circuits done, the old school Soviet Union circuits. Is what I think this is. I think this is like an old Russian throws circuit, like a throwers circuit. So for shot putters, discus throwers, javelin throwers, and it's kind of a bit of mobility, lots of rotation stuff in there for them. But yeah, it was fun. So that's one of them done. 2 rounds back to back. Going to do another 2 rounds back to back. That means with the hip and spine mobility, section A 2 rounds, section B 2 rounds, all of that together, because you wouldn't normally be holding the camera. That's just for you guys. That would be like 30 minutes, all like done. Little bit of a cool down and then you're out of there. So it's great that you can kind of get a better fit feel as though you're doing something in such a short period of time. Non-destructive, good for your hormones, good for your joints, ticks every single box. Ben Simon, Semtech Systems, check him out. On to section 2, let's go. Right guys, here we go again, moving on to section A. So lat pull down was the first one here. On my knees with a resistance band, and I attempted to go for 20 reps. Not too much resistance again, but that is kind of the point. It is literally following the purpose of perfusion of muscle tissue. So basically just get the flipping blood pumping, get the muscles working, and as soon as that blood starts flowing everywhere, it does all the things it needs to do. That's where the magic happens, and recovery of tissues generally starts to work, as well as, again, hormone health and everything else that's kind of been mentioned. Moving on to seated behind the neck press. Again, this is one where my shoulders did kind of struggle, but I've done this a couple of times over the last few weeks. Tried to do it nice and dynamic, and because of the weird immobility in my left shoulder, I just tried to keep my elbows and my shoulders in kind of the same position without my left elbow being pulled forwards. So for this, I was a little bit more mindful of not necessarily going too quick, but just aiming for symmetry. Frog hangs next, which are an interesting one actually. Basically, it kind of really tuck the pelvis, lift the knees up, straighten the legs, and then allow them to drop slowly. So it's kind of a controlled eccentric core exercise, but obviously you're a little bit out of breath by this point already, and you're working on your grip. You've got to make sure when it's eccentric focused that you're allowing the legs to go down under control at the same speed on the last rep as you would be on the first one. Standing lat flies, that is basically lateral raises again. Trying to get a little bit more range than I normally would do, keeping my core nice and tight, and again, you're slightly out of breath at this point. Hanging double leg eagles follow that, and that is not really like toes to bar. It's a lot more controlled and a lot slower. So I'm bringing everything up slightly to one side, taking both feet to kind of one hand on the bar, down under control, and then from as much of a dead hang as possible, up to the other side. A lot spicier than you think, and anything where you're hanging and moving the torso around and kind of crunching and decreasing the amount of space inside the trunk. Always harder when you're a little bit out of breath and the diaphragm wants to pull down and put a little bit of air in, but you're actually squeezing the sides of the torso, so basically not letting it do that. So really good for the core, really good for breath control, and again, a little bit of extra grip. Arm curls here, not really much to say other than the fact that I just love doing biceps. Not purely for a bro pump, but overall elbow flexion is an important movement. And I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't a little bit glad there was some kind of bicep work in this program. Here we have some flies, and I actually tried to double down on making this a little bit cheekier by lifting my feet up to make sure, and again, it's a really, really thin bench actually, so making sure everything had to work to keep me kind of controlled and symmetrical in the middle. So only 10 kilos each side, so it's not really going to challenge my pecs that much. Obviously, I do want a little bit of a pump, but I'd rather kind of go slightly slower if I need to and let the core work to make sure that I'm not falling off the side by making sure that it's nice and balanced throughout. Leg curls on here, there's no hamstring curl at root 1. So I've got the sliders on the floor, really engage the glutes and keep them engaged the whole time to make sure, again, that it is the hamstrings that are actually making sure that this movement happens. It's not the glutes pulling. I don't want my pelvis to turn. I want to keep everything pretty much neutral to make sure that it's the hammies themselves that are contracting and making this movement a reality. And here I've got some dumbbell toe touches, trying to make sure your shoulders do as little as possible with this, and you really want to be kind of muscle centric and not as movement centric in this particular exercise, making sure that it's the abs that are doing the work, really, really squeezing and shrinking the gap between the bottom rib and the pelvis. That's what the abs do. If you can feel that in every single rep, you're onto a winner and you're doing it right. And toe risers, which is basically just calf raises off a step to make sure you get a little bit of extra range. And on this, I just did 10 neutral, 10 with my toes in, 10 with my toes out, and already after just 30 calf raises, I know with my Achilles that my calves are not particularly great. They are super tight, they are super sore, they can handle massive amounts of load when they're locked in, but moving them slowly and under control is definitely something I'm not too used to. So I'm glad that's in this. Again, it's an opportunity for me to work on my weaknesses, of which this is definitely one of them. And there we have it, guys, bodybuilding and ancillary lifts. Group A in the bag, that is done. 10 to 20 reps twice through, and that is that section of the session complete. And there we have it, section B, the bodybuilding set done. I feel good, actually. Again, I truly do feel as though I've worked. I've done something. I can feel that I haven't put any kind of heavy load through my body, but I'm a bit out of breath, I'm a bit sweaty, and I do feel as though I've got a little bit of a burn, which again, nice little bit humble pie again. I wasn't kind of expecting, maybe arrogantly, I thought that wouldn't be the case. I felt a little bit of a burn when I did it with Ben a couple of weeks ago, and I was no quicker today, but dumbbells, I think them were like 7.5, so all I've got is 2 10-kilo dumbbells and a barbell. That's the only load I'm using for the whole thing. But when you really kind of make sure that you don't have much rest between, it's good, man, it works. So again, I get it, a video that some people might be like, okay, interesting, intellectually, academically doesn't really resonate with me too much. I get that, some people would feel like that, I probably would if I was still in kind of like my early to mid 20s, but it just makes me realize that I've like had scheduled deloads before, which might be like I've got a really good kind of 9-day deload process before a competition, but in terms of actually having a good couple of weeks where I don't have any barbells on my back, just to truly let my tissues recover and kind of get all the adaptations that they've been looking to get for the last however long kind of thing. I don't know if I've ever done that kind of, you know, other than kind of possibly being injured. Like last year I ruptured my adductor, two years ago now, sorry. I had like 3 weeks off particular bits of lower body work, but I'm still training upper body, still doing other bits and bobs. So I don't know, it's made me realize this is long overdue. But again, bit of humble pie. I'm communicating to you now from quite a weak place in terms of my body's still battered, but this is like day 1, or kind of beginning of week 2, because I didn't really do much last week. Beginning of week 2 of 3, so I'm kind of a third the way through in terms of the stuff that I'm doing and time between those kind of workouts. So I'm excited to see how I feel at the end. And I'm expecting to just kind of feel looser. I'm going to go from 1 massage a week to 2 or 3. Yeah, excited to see how it goes. And I look forward. Sound like I was getting emotional then. I promise you it was just a verbal. I'm looking forward to kind of using this as a little bit of a reference point in a couple of months, when I do genuinely believe this year is kind of a juncture for me. It's a definite kind of fork in the road. I'm going to be training harder. I'm going to be training smarter. I'm really excited to see what this year holds for me. So I'm looking forward to kind of using this as a reference point to be like, I was battered and I made the smart decision to take a couple of weeks off because I'm playing the long game. This isn't about being strong next week. This is about making sure that I have the highest kind of net strength and fitness through my life. I'm in my 30s, man. I'm not in my 80s. Make no mistake. Don't f about with it. I'm still here to play. I ain't gone. This isn't like rehab for geriatrics. I'm still around, do not worry. But this is 2 weeks that I'm taking off, and I believe there'll be absolutely no time before I'm kind of like probably back on my feet. So, really hope you enjoyed that. As always, stay strong, stay healthy, stay awesome, stay rested, stay smart. I'll see you guys soon.